On this Saturday installment of Locked On Texans, John and I will be joined by Jonathan Alexander, Houston Texans beat reporter for the Houston Chronicle, as we get his thoughts on whether or not it's a good thing that the Houston Texans have to go back to Davis Mills as their starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a weekend episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, literally every day now. I'm John Hickman, joined by Cody Davis, here to discuss the Houston Texans. There's no way we're going to talk about the Texans today and their opportunity that they passed on, which I still think is a great idea, the right decision. But passing up on Baker Mayfield on Thursday against the Las Vegas Raiders, Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. 98-yard drive that was capped off by a Baker Mayfield touchdown pass. On that drive and throughout that game, Baker Mayfield made some critical and clutch throws, very impressive throws for a guy that, he didn't even put on a practice jersey for the LA Rams. Right, was signed and immediately put on the game jersey. And the talk of the town is, did the Houston Texans make a mistake by not signing Baker Mayfield, as they are the number one team on the waiver wire? Was that a mistake?
I don't want to look at this conversation to say whether or not claiming Baker Mayfield off of waivers was a mistake, because look, he would have brought better quarterback play to the Houston Texans within these last 5 games. But at the end of the day, I mean, it really didn't make sense, like we mentioned early on in the week. It didn't make sense for them to do so, because that's a veteran quarterback, wants to go to a winnable situation where it looked like he can start and actually have somewhat of a future there. The Houston Texans, it doesn't matter who's the starting quarterback is going to be for these 5 remaining games. Come week 1 of the 2023 campaign, we've been sitting here talking about the debut of Bryce Young, hopefully. But, John.
Can I say something really quick?
Go right ahead.
So, my sister just called me and she just had a baby.
Hey.
I'm doing a show right now. I'm sorry, guys. She just had the baby. I'm going to call you back. I got to do the show. Locked On Texas fans, shout out to my sister. I'm gonna call you back.
Congratulations, man. It's always good to add a new addition to the family. But speaking of new additions, John, I don't want to turn this into whether or not the Houston Texans made a mistake by not claiming Baker Mayfield off of waivers, but I do want to look at it from a standpoint of the Houston Texans have basically done themselves a disservice by this strict rule of every single player that they bring in, it takes them 3 to 4 weeks before they get out there on the field. And everyone knows the story about Baker Mayfield. He was waived on Monday. The Rams picked him up on Tuesday, had basically a walkthrough with the organization on Wednesday, had an opportunity to lift that team up to a victory. Not only that, early on in the season, ironically, his former teammate and Christian McCaffrey, he had a similar experience, was waived by the Carolina Panthers on a Monday, and by that Thursday, he was helping the San Francisco 49ers win a game. I forgot who their opponent was, but it did not take these players 3 to 4 weeks to get out there on the field. As for when you take a look at the Houston Texans side of things, it doesn't matter if it was Tyron Johnson, Tyler Johnson, and we're seeing it right now with Eno Benjamin, that every single player that they bring in, every single time, we're sitting there asking ourselves, why is it taking so long for them to go out there and get meaningful snaps on the field? John, I mentioned, and I understand that there is a big talent gap between guys like Tyler Johnson and Tyron Johnson and Eno Benjamin, where you compare him to the likes of Baker Mayfield and Christian McCaffrey. But this is something I've been preaching for this entire season. You're 1-10-1. You are literally the worst team in the National Football League. And if you are preaching that you want to put better product on the field, Why are you not using these players that you're getting, whether it be trade, whether it be through the waiver wire, whether it be through free agency? I don't understand it.
Man, I look at the situation with Baker and I ask myself, how complicated is this playbook?
It can't be that complicated. You're 1-10-1.
Well, that may play to why the offense is struggling because the playbook may be complicated and they may have had to shrink it down to simplify it. But again, guys, Baker Mayfield went to play for Sean McVay. Sean McVay is an extremely, extremely talented offensive mind. That's been proven. And he's done that with the likes of Jared Goff, who, by the way, Jared Goff is playing some good football in Detroit. Mm-hmm. But one year, Jared Goff was a top 5 quarterback.
I think that was 2018 or 2019.
The year they went to the Super Bowl. Man, listen, Sean McVay is yards, if we're going to keep it to football fields ahead of Pep Hamilton in terms of offensive mind. But I think everybody has a right to feel, looking at Baker Mayfield step on that field, get a game-winning drive after not even practicing, and asking, why does Tyrone Johnson or Tyler Johnson, why do those guys got to wait? Why does Eno got to wait? Why does any
Lamar Rodgers
has to wait and go through this learning curve process? So either this playbook in Houston offensively is complicated and it's a 2-year playbook, which may be why we've seen a decline in Davis Mills, or like I mentioned on Twitter, because I addressed this as well, maybe adding players on the field that can help your team out isn't in the plans. And that leads us to, what are we doing to do? Embrace the tank. Simply, man, you got to love what you saw out of Baker Mayfield on Thursday Night Football. It's good to see somebody who's been in the position that he's been in succeed like that. But when we look at why didn't he come to Houston, or why has players in similar situations like Baker that has came to Houston not worked out? They released Tyrone Johnson, they released Tyler Johnson, and both of those guys, it took 2 to 3 weeks to get on the field. Well, offensively, Sean McVay is somebody who can make it work. Pep Hamilton, who the question marks were there when he was hired. Guys, these days, every potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. And you want to be 100% sure and certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. Well, that's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Super easy. Listen, create your job post on LinkedIn Jobs for free. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word you're hiring. With simple tools like screening questions that can make it super easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. This is really why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. So with LinkedIn Jobs, like I mentioned, they help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Saturday installment of Locked On Texans. And as promised, I have my brother, Mr. Jonathan Alexander from the Houston Chronicle. You guys know him as one of the Houston Texans beat reporter. Jonathan, what's going on, man?
What's up, Cody, man? How's it going, bro?
Doing well, man. I'm not going to lie to you. I am ready for the season to be over. I'm so sorry that this was your welcome to Houston season. I apologize because I thought Davis Mills was going to be better. I apologize because I thought Lovie Smith was going to be better. I apologize because I thought this team was going to be better, man. So I just want to say,
high hopes. You did have a lot of high hopes for the team.
Yeah, man. And I just want to say I'm sorry, but here we are entering week 14 of the regular season. The 1-10-1 Houston Texans are facing off against one of the best teams in the league. Unfortunately, the Dallas Cowboys at 9-3. Jonathan, you've been around the team just as much as I have. Matter of fact, maybe even a little bit more. What do you make of another quarterback change for the Houston Texans?
I mean, I think it was a decision they had to do, right? I mean, Davis Mills was struggling. He had led the league with 11 interceptions before he was benched. But Kyle Allen was worse. I mean, you look at last week's game, man, and he gave more points to the Browns than he scored for his own team. He had that interception for that pick six, and then he had the fumble that he fumbled that they were covered for a touchdown. And if there's one thing we know talking to Lovey and really any coach to be for that matter, they don't like when players turn the ball over, and Kyle Allen was making that number one mistake. So they had to go. They had no other choice but to go with Davis Mills. They could have signed Baker Mayfield as well, but the way their philosophy has been, it obviously takes players a while before they feel comfortable put somebody in the starting lineup. But they had to go with Davis Mills, and Davis Mills is part of their future. So, when they first benched him, it wasn't the end all be all. They knew that there was an opportunity that he could possibly come back, but it just happened sooner than later because Kyle Allen was just so bad.
You mentioned Baker Mayfield, and me and my co-host John in the first segment, we just talked about it. Jonathan, and I want to pick your brain on this. Do you think the Houston Texans kind of shot themselves in the foot, not just because they decided to pass on Baker Mayfield, but because of the fact that throughout this whole entire season, they have had an opportunity to pick up some great guys, whether they be off of waivers or whether they be through free agency. We look at Tyler Johnson as of right now, and I know you asked Lovie Smith about this on countless occasions. The running back Eno Benjamin, the philosophy that they have, where if they bring in a new player, they bring in a new prospect, that it takes them 3 to 4 weeks to finally get going. When you take a look at what Baker Mayfield did, he signed to the team on Tuesday, went to one practice, and next thing you know, he's leading them down a game-winning drive on Thursday night.
Yeah, here's what I'll say. I'll say that what Baker Mayfield does and what Baker Mayfield did on Thursday night, I don't know that I've seen another player do that. And if it does happen, it doesn't happen very often. So that was kind of like an anomaly. If you looked at Baker Mayfield and the way he played for the Carolina Panthers, he was terrible. So any team, it would have it made sense that the Texans didn't pick him up. Now, as far as them holding off on playing players, I think that they have been a little too reluctant to play players and to do things when they haven't worked. Like I think they a long time ago could have used a 2 running back system. They've been using Dameon Pierce a lot, and only Dameon Pierce. And I think that they could have gone to Dare Ogunbowale a little earlier and maybe use him, maybe run it with Dameon 22, 23, 24 times and run it with Dare 10 times. You're starting to see other teams in the league, like the Dallas Cowboys, for instance, like other team, the Cleveland Browns, who use multiple running backs. And I think that's where the Texans could have done a little bit better. I don't know if they've shot themselves in the foot, but they could have taken other approaches. I think they've been slow in reacting to certain things. So I think they could have been a little bit more quicker on adjusting. But that Baker Mayfield thing, that was an anomaly. What he did was amazing. I don't think I haven't seen a player come in on that doesn't happen. It is difficult. I look at last year. I covered Cam Newton, and he played well his first game. He had they simplified the offense for him. They only gave him a few plays when he first came. But after that, when he got fully ingrained into the playbook and they made him the starter, he struggled because he didn't know the playbook in such a short period of time. That is difficult. So for what Baker Mayfield did was an anomaly, and I don't think he'll have another game like that. I think he hit lightning in a bottle.
There's 5 games left into this terrible season, and it's even worse because it's the 20th anniversary of the Houston Texans. But 5 games in, you heard Lovie Smith say it early on in the week, that he's hoping that because Davis Mills had an opportunity to study the game from afar over the last 2 weeks, he's hoping that that's actually going to improve his play. A little bit similar to what took place last year, even though instead of sitting out for 2 games, he sat out for 4. Jonathan, do you see any type of way Davis Mills can actually be better than the performance that he put on prior to his benching?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that him having sit out will allow him to kind of sit back and look at what he's done wrong. Is give him a chance to breathe and maybe even rest up a little bit and kind of look at film, take more time to look at film. I mean, he mentioned in his press conference that it was kind of week to week. After you lose, you move on, and
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of a whirlwind for him, and maybe a lot of things were moving too fast for Davis. So he benefited from the time off last year, and I think he can possibly take what he learned from this year and his struggles and apply that here. So yeah, I think he can play better. I think he will play better. I think it's going to be a struggle because it's looking like Nico Collins and Brandon Cooks won't play in this game, so he'll be without his top 2 weapons. But I think the other thing that the Texans are going to do is they're going to put a huge emphasis on running the football. They're not going to go away from the running game. They're going to try not to make things difficult for Davis. And the thing that got Davis in trouble really was his turnovers. And I think if he's mindful of that, he can be a better player.
Jonathan, last question before getting out of here. The Texans playing against the Cowboys, like I mentioned, one of the best teams in the league. Is there anything that you see when you take a look at this matchup? Is there anything you see where you say if the Houston Texans exploit this, they can have a small chance of pulling out what will probably be the biggest upset of the season?
No, not really. But not in actuality. I think the only way the Texans win this game is if they put on the same type of defensive performance that they put on. They stopped the run like they did against the Browns. They played well enough to win that game defensively. Offensively, they were just putrid. But if they stopped the Browns' running game, they've been limited in the passing game all year, except that Dolphins game. If they have a good defensive game and they run the football and they establish the run and Davis Mills doesn't turn over the ball, like they use that blueprint is what they use to beat the Jaguars. They ran the football well. They played great defense. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't do too much. Davis Mills doesn't even have to do too much. If they cannot turn over the football, which means they will win the turnover battle because if they play good defense, they're going to get a turnover. That means they win the turnover battle. They establish the run. Then I think they could pull off the upset. But do I think it will happen? No, it's just too many factors, not enough weapons out there. The Texans, while I think they'll probably play better than they did last week, I just don't think they have a chance at winning.
And really quick, before I let you go, you mentioned the Texans actually improving with their ability to stop the run. Do you really believe that they made improvements in that area, or do you think it's more so when you take a look at the past 3 games? I mean, you take a look at Washington, you take a look at Miami, they basically beat them with their passing attack, and then when you take a look at what the Cleveland Browns did, they was basically using that game more so of a scrimmage to get Deshaun Watson back into rhythm, to say the least.
Yeah, I think they've improved. I mean, I look at the yards per carry, and even dating back to the Giants game, Giants just ran it 47 times.
Oh yeah,
they had a lot of yards, but they just ran it so many times.
And I think Saquon had I think it was 4.3 or 3.9, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah. So they held him to a good yards per carry average, and that's what I look at when I see whether they made improvement. Because if you go back to the game against the Titans, the game against the Raiders, Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, and I can't remember the second string guy from the Titans.
Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, no, that was from the Bears.
Oh, the Bears.
Yeah. But it was the second string guy who's slipping my mind for the Titans. But they were busting off 10-yard gains. Their yards per carry average was high, and they were getting anything they wanted. And then Henry, of course, ran for more than 200 yards again. But I see them. The defense line is doing a lot better job. Malik Collins is there. They're doing a better job of making tackles. So they've definitely improved in stopping the run for sure. But it doesn't mean that they're some good run stopping team. But they're better than they were earlier in the season.
Jonathan Alexander, one of the Houston Texans beat reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Jonathan, really quick, where can our listeners follow you at on social media?
You can follow me on Twitter at John M. Alexander, JONM Alexander. And you follow my coworker, Brooks Cabina, B. Cabina, and our work at HoustonChronicle.com.
This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we are sure you're going to love, and that's why you'll be able to find it. A sneak peek of the Block Forever podcast available on Locked On NFL right now. Blocked Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil sits down with star players, coaches, and former pros across the league to get real information about what happens on the field, behind the scenes, inside locker rooms, during team meetings, and back at the hotel. New episodes of Block Forever will be recorded and released every week ahead of Thursday Night Football. So head over to the Locked On NFL for a sneak peek of Block Forever, or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcast, available everywhere right now. Audible, hey, get in the game. Thanks for making Locked On Texans your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Saturday installment of Locked On Texans. Once again, that was Jonathan Alexander, Houston Texans beat reporter for the Houston Chronicle. And, you know, John, I just had to apologize to him. I've already apologized to DJ Bieniemy, the ESPN reporter. I had to apologize to those two because when they got here, I told them that the Texans are still in the early stages of the rebuild, but I told them that, Davis Mills has some promise, and I told them that this year's Houston Texans team would not be as bad as last year's Houston Texans team. And I started giving out my apologies after Derrick Henry told them up inside the NRG Stadium, and I still feel like my apologies isn't enough.
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes apology, just saying I apologize, ain't enough. Now, both of us, we come from the 90s, we 90s babies. Sometimes, you know what you got to do? You got to beg. Please, baby, I know. Oh, we got the end of the road.
Man.
Yeah, man. Got to do that sometime when you want to apologize and say I'm sorry. Oh, but we also got to get into the YouTube comments. Really quick, man. Actually, my brother, Avery Dewalt, he commented on one of our shows. He said, who has a name or brand that's in the NFL that wants to play for the Texans? It either has to be a rookie who has to establish himself, but an established player doesn't want to come to Houston. That's going to be an issue, bringing in players in the free agency.
And I 100% agree with that statement, and that's part of the reason why this season is another disappointment, because John, as I mentioned early on in the week, when Lovie Smith was hired, Pep Hamilton was elevated. It seemed like there was some stability. You had some promise in Davis Mills. You had a really good draft class that you was able to put together, because you knew going into the 2023 offseason, that this team was going to fall into a lot of money. They're going to have to overpay subpar talent in order to get a little bit of talent here. And it's unfortunate, because I truly do believe had the Texans show some sense of stability, they would have been in better line of getting better talent in order to have a better season for the 2023 campaign.
Derek Dynasty, Cody, a few shows back, I asked the world, name their top 5 love songs. So Derek Dynasty responded, and I think this first song should be on everybody's list. 'Cause I Love You, Lenny Williams. Then he continued with Call My Name, Prince, Sweet Lady by Tyrese, Adorn by Miguel. And this next song I love, and it was a shocker that this made the list, My Imagination by the Temptations. I like that pick. I'm not gonna lie.
I wouldn't necessarily call that a love song. That's more like one of those sad songs, though.
My imagination.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, he's singing about he wanting to be with this person, but it's just all in his imagination.
I have a theory on "Cause I Love You." By the way, when you listen to that song, at the beginning of the song, it always sounds like a car door is opening, like at the beginning of that song, very faint.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like "Cause I Love You" was a Stalker song. You put two together. He was getting out the car.
You could kind of say the same thing about Just My Imagination. The first line, each day through my window, I watch her as she passes by.
Oh, man.
I say to myself,
oh, man,
such a lucky guy.
Oh, man.
That's why I say with music, it doesn't matter if it's love songs, pop songs, rap songs, country songs. Don't listen to the words because it would kill. It would kill your thoughts about that song.
I just want black folks to realize Before I Let Go is a song about him going to sleep around before he locked down with a woman.
See what I mean?
But I want to move on to Jarvis Price. He said that they could also trade the first pick to the Saints. They need a quarterback too, for some picks and the rights to Sean Payton if they decide to move on from Lovey and if Sean actually wants to come back. Now, interesting enough, even though trades for coaches are very rare, it has happened. The most well-known one is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sending 4 draft picks, including 2 first-rounders and $8 million to the Oakland Raiders for John Gruden in 2002.
It worked out for him, though.
Tampa Bay did. And you know what's funny? The Bucs beat the Raiders in the Super Bowl.
I remember that.
And was it Derek Thomas? They needed a certain amount of turnovers on the year for that Tampa 2 defense, and they got it in the Super Bowl with a interception ran back to the house.
I would love Sean Payton to come to Houston, of course, because I'm from New Orleans, Saints my number 1 team. But I don't think he would be. I don't think he'd be interested in coming back to the NFL to coach the Houston Texans. And you also got to keep in mind, he also wants to go somewhere where he's going to have a certain type of power. And look, it's been a power struggle with the Houston Texans for a very long time. And if Nick Caserio is still the general manager, I definitely don't see that happening. But what I will say is, if Sean Payton was to come to Houston, John, you played around with this idea a couple weeks ago, and I do want to bring it back up. That means they would definitely have to go out and get Bryce Young. You look at a quarterback who is a little bit undersized. He's not really like a physical stature, not really your ideal, but he has all the traits that you want. And he basically had the same thing in a still up and coming Drew Brees when the New Orleans Saints signed Drew Brees and hired him in 2006, and look what those 2 guys were able to do. So
yeah, I wouldn't say trading that first pick, because if Sean Payton wants to come into Houston, he wants that first pick.
Well, they got they're gonna have 2 top 10 picks, and I think the
Browns right now is like an 11 or 12. But he said the first pick.
Oh, the very first, the number one. No,
Sean Payton's gonna want that. Sean Payton's gonna want that. Hey man, thank y'all for stopping by, kicking it with us over the weekend with the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm John Hickman. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube under the name Locked On Texans. And by the way, I got a niece in the world now, another niece in the world now. So I'm happy. I'm all smiles, man. Enjoy the weekend. Y'all do the same.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. If you are a Houston Texans fan going to Dallas and watching the game, I'm pretty sure 9 times out of 10 you're going to get into a fight in the stands.
Just win the fight.
Lose that fight.
Let's win the fight.
On the field, we're definitely going to lose, but give us something to cheer about.
At least paint them.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.